So tonight I want to give you a little bit in the news. There's a lot of things happening. If you've been studying a little bit of the news, and unfortunately we get an Americanized news, you're really not getting a whole lot that's happening in Israel, but there is some activity going on, a military activity in Israel this last week. There's a lot of bombing that's coming over from the Gaza Strip, and not almost, but all of the things that have come over, all of the ordnance that has come over has been taken down, or the Iron Shield has taken care of it. And tonight I'm going to tell you a little bit of a synopsis of Israel's military prowess, and I think it's really important for you to hear that, because a lot of people wonder what's going to happen there. Well, we know spiritually, but I also want you to know physically what's going on. So before I do that, let me tell you this one. This I showed, I think it was yesterday I showed it, and I want to show it to you again. This is it's called Double Standard, and I'm going to let you see this picture. That's Muhammad Abbas, and you'll understand why I'm putting that there in a moment. If a picture is usually worth 1,000 words, then when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, a picture is worth 1,000,000 words. Just as informative as a picture, however, is the context in which it's presented. An unfavorable caption or description can influence perception of a situation just as directly as the photo itself. Take, for instance, the outcry relating to two recent photographs, one involving Palestinian Authority President Muhammad Abbas, that's his picture there, and the other involving U.S. Ambassador to Israel David Friedman. On Monday, President Abbas was photographed in the Ishtari Arab Hospital in Ramallah, where he was being treated for pneumonia. In the photograph, Abbas is pictured sitting and reading Al-Hayat Al-Jadida, the official Palestinian Authority newspaper. The scene appears innocuous enough until one notices a massive political cartoon on the back of the newspaper depicting an Israeli soldier poisoning a Palestinian baby. So I'm going to show you the close-up of that. That's the photo. Now this went worldwide because he was in the hospital for pneumonia, and conveniently he has this paper that's a Palestinian paper, and it's showing, it's an anti-Israeli paper. It's showing an IDF soldier, an Israeli soldier, poisoning a baby, and this goes over the whole world. So there's a shock and an outcry. It should be anyway. Well, let me continue on. The very next day, during a visit to Bnei Brak, for an event conducted by Akia, which is an Israeli nonprofit charity organization, Ambassador Friedman, that's the U.S. ambassador, appeared in a picture in front of an altered photo depicting the third temple on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. That's this one. So this picture, instead of the Dome of the Rock that should be there, a third temple was put in there. He did not know it. So somebody put that in. Now just listen to how the world and the media responds. So it's in place of the Dome of the Rock. Two instances, two controversies. And in the aftermath, two public relations teams frantically scrambling to repair the PR nightmare. Only that isn't what happened. While the Friedman gaffe made international headlines, with CNN and the Washington Post reporting on the story, the Palestinian cartoonist responsible for the caricature was tragically robbed of worldwide publicity and acclaim. What does that mean? Well, it means this. It means both of these pictures were wrong. They shouldn't have done them. It incites people to argue and to get into scuffs about it. So both of them were wrong to do. One of them this one went worldwide, and they apologized. Our ambassador didn't know it, so they apologized. They tried to slip it in. It was a political move, and they apologized. But even though that picture of Muhammad Abbas was all over the place, no one in America, not one media outlet in America or even Britain or even Europe said anything about it. And so that's the double standard that happens in Israel. It happens all the time. You see Israel being blamed for things, and Palestinians just have a free market and a free get out of jail free card, and they just continue to do things just like that. So that's some of the things that we're talking about. When we talk about Israel, we talk about the Palestinians, it is definitely one-sided worldwide, and that's a perfect example that happened this week. Let me give you a little bit more that's going on here. This one is the amazing growth and operation capabilities of the IDF. This is the one I was telling you about. Between 1948 and 1977, the Israeli Defense Force grew from 90,000 personnel and 12 brigades to 700,000 personnel and 44 maneuverable brigades. Initially, it fielded only 20 obsolete tanks in 1948 when it started its statehood. 30 years later, it fields 3,800 tanks. Most of them are state-of-the-art. During the same period, the Israeli Air Force grew from one single ill-equipped fighter squadron to 24 fighter attack squadrons armed with cutting-edge combat aircraft. So when they were attacked in 1948 by 22 aggressive Arab nations, they only had one squadron, and it was ill-equipped. Now they have 20 fighter squadrons with cutting-edge combat aircraft. The number of combat sorties the IAF could sustain daily grew from a mere 20, that's all they could do in a day in 1948, to 1,200 a day today. The Navy grew from virtually nothing to the dominant force in the Eastern Mediterranean with 24 very capable fast attack craft. Since 1977, the IDF continued to grow and modernize. However, in 2003 and again in 2014, the IDF's mobilization order to battle was significantly reduced. What it says is this, is that, believe it or not, Israel has 930,000 ready available soldiers to go to battle. 930,000, almost a million. But they've been cutting down their defense budget because they are so capable of going to battle. It's the only nation that you could possibly imagine that is cutting down its defense battle and its defense ordinance and its defense appropriations because they're so well equipped. So Israel is definitely ready. God has done a whole lot of things for Israel. Israel currently deploys the world's densest and most capable air defense system, even past the United States, by the way, which can intercept long-range ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, short-range missiles, rockets, aircrafts, and UAVs. That's the Iron Dome. It has a small but very capable coastal navy that is equipped with advanced corvettes, fast attack craft, attack submarines, and very advanced small craft. It is the world's second most effective space-based surveillance capability, providing near real-time coverage of its theater of operations. In other words, it has satellites in space that can watch every single piece of ground from their enemies. And so it fields IRBMs, land and sea-based cruise missiles, air-to-ground launched ballistic missiles, air-delivered bombs, artillery, and rocket-delivered tactical warheads. It also has an aerosol chemical weapon delivery system, as well as an active biological welfare program. Israel has an exceptional civil defense system, and finally, it is a world leader in cyber warfare. So when somebody says about Israel and they worry about Israel, you do not have to worry about Israel. While the overall readiness of Israeli ground forces, primarily based on reserve units, has substantially declined from its first level in the 1950s and mid-60s, Israeli reserve units are far superior to any other international reserve unit, such as the United States National Guard, being able to thrust into combat within days rather than months. If we call out our National Guard into a major crisis, it's going to take a month to mobilize all of our National Guard. If Israel calls out its National Guard, it's going to take them 2 days to mobilize. And so the IDF has been able to exploit the advantages of modern technology far more rapidly than any other major military power. Its ability to foreshorten the sensor-to-shooter link is unparalleled internationally. In other words, as soon as something's launched at them, they know it. They're never caught by surprise. They know instantly, and they instantly counter that measure. So I just want to let you know that Israel's going to be okay. Somebody say amen. All right, let me give you this one. This is something that's very, very new, revolutionary, and unprecedented, and I want you to hear about it. First time ever, a Jewish Christian party is going to run for the Israeli Knesset. Avi Lipkin, a well-known lecturer who has spoken in over 1,000 churches, announced that he has formed the first joint Jewish Christian party and intends to lead it in the next Knesset elections. The acceptance of Lipkin's Gush Hatanash, the Biblical Bloc Party, application was announced on Wednesday. The party's founding document reads like this, and I'm quoting, "The Biblical Bloc protects everyone who believes in the Bible and opposes the ethnic cleansing of Jews and Christians from the land of Israel." First time ever Christians are mentioned in something like this. The Biblical Bloc represents parties all over the world who espouse Judeo-Christian democratic Western culture. The party will also work to strengthen Israel by formulating a program to improve public relations around the world by recruiting Jewish and Christian speakers and training them to improve Israel's image in the world and protect Western democracy. The essence of the party is much more simple. Christianity, it's the quote, "Christianity has its share of hatred for Jews, but we have our share of hatred for Christians." Lipkin told Breaking Israel News, "We have to stop hating the Christians. We have to become like Ruth and Naomi. In my lecture tours, I have seen that many Christians are ready for this." In a candid interview with Breaking Israeli News, Lipkin explained how this vision of renewed relationship between Jews and Christians makes sense in Israeli politics. He sees the Christian demographic rapidly becoming a major factor, which shockingly currently has no representation in the Knesset. So what's happening? I won't read you the rest of it. Here's what's going on. Arabs, before Islam came in 632 AD, Arabs pretty much were either pagans or they were Christians. There was a whole lot of Arab Christians. And so one of the things that's happened is the Arab Christians, or a lot in Israel, there's quite a few of them in Israel. Matter of fact, some of them, one of my friends still goes to the Church of the Nativity where they still speak Aramaic, the Jesus language. And so what happens is they're caught in no man's land. They associate with the Palestinians, or they have associated with the Palestinians because they're Arabs and they realize that there's an ethnic tie there. But since Hamas has come on the scene and ISIS, they're pulling away from them because they realize that they're un-Christian, they're killing randomly. So the Israeli Arab Christians, they're Israelis, they're Arabs, and they're Christians. Most people don't understand that. They now are going to have a seat in the Knesset. And not only them, but even Messianic Jews. So Messianic Jews will be represented by, this is the first time ever. Let me tell you why this is so amazing to me. Two reasons. Number one, if I go to Israel and I proselytize, if I preach on the streets, I can have my passport taken and I can be kicked out of the country. It's illegal because Israel wants, even though it's a Western democracy, even though it's based on a Western democracy, it wants to preserve its ethnic background, Judaism. But now this opens the gate, and what it does is it shows that Christians and Israelis, Jews, are being able to coexist together. That's the first time ever, trust me. I have a friend who's a Hasidic Jew. As a matter of fact, when we have a break, I'll show you something he sent to all of you. And he's not even allowed to talk to me, and I'll explain that story in a moment. Well, now those barriers are coming down, and Israeli Jews are starting to warm up to Christians. Let me tell you how amazing that is. Because Paul says in Romans that all Israel shall be saved. That's what he says in Romans. This is the first time we've ever seen anything like it. The other thing that's amazing, does anybody have any idea how this happened so quickly? Does anybody know, can they point your finger to something that shows that this should happen quickly? Moving the embassy. See, Trump is a Christian. According to Jews, he's a Christian. He's a Western Christian. And basically, he has done something that no one else has done for them. And so he has opened up Christianity. Forget about his personal Christianity. They view him as a Christian coming from America. How many of you understand what I'm talking about? So he has opened up a warming of all Christians for Israel. That is unprecedented, and it's amazing. So it's the first time ever. His party list will be half Jewish and half Christian. This party taken from a broad spectrum of both religions. Lipkin made Aliyah over 50 years ago. That's coming to Israel from another country, from New York, and lives in Kedar, Gush Etzion. He served in the IDF as a spokesman for 17 years. And by the way, one other thing is fueling this. A lot of Russian Jews have made Aliyah also. They've come in. Most of those Russian Jews, and again, this sounds strange to you, but most of those Russian Jews were Christian. And so they're Jewish in their ethnic group, but in religion they're Christian. They made the Aliyah. How many are getting this? So, Judaism is not just a religion, it's also an ethnic group. And so they made the Aliyah, and so they're going to be represented. So I'm telling you, of all the news that I've read, it may not strike you, but this one strikes me amazingly because it's something that's very biblically fulfilling. Let me give you another thing that's coming on. This is Paraguay now moved their embassy to Jerusalem. I told you it was going to happen. Nation after nation. Netanyahu said we have no better friend than Paraguay. They officially moved its country's embassy to Jerusalem on Monday with President Horacio Cortez in Israel for the ceremony, also attended by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. So they're joining other nations. You know why? Because America is the ATM of the world. We give money to all these nations. And so the best way they can support America is support America's choices. And so we're watching nation after nation now recognize Israel, or Jerusalem is Israel's capital. Let me give you a little bit more as we go on for economy. And if you know that, that's a whirlwind. That's a tornado over money. This one's kind of interesting. 12 indications the next major global economic crisis could be just around the corner. So we think about peace and safety and about a good economy, but listen to all the factors that are lining up. There have not been so many trouble signs for the global economy in a very long time. Analysts are sounding the alarm about junk bond defaults. The smart money is getting out of stocks at an astounding rate. Mortgage rates are absolutely skyrocketing, and Europe is already facing a full-blown financial meltdown. Let me stop myself here before I do this. Let me inject something. The other day, I wanted to go to the bank, and I did go to the bank, and I wanted to put some cash in my account. So I'm going to tell you what bank it was too. It was Wells Fargo. I want to put cash in my account. They would not let me put cash in my account without my license. How many else have faced this yet? Anybody? Right over here. Then they sent me a little paper telling me why. They're protecting me from criminals. Now, let me get this right. A criminal's going to go and put money in my account. I said, how in the world are you protecting me from criminals? Let them put money in my account. I don't care. Obviously, when we talk about the cashless society, and we talk about digital currency, and we're talking about tracking, this is coming to the next step. So now in Wells Fargo, I think it was started, well, I guess it was Monday, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe last Monday, you cannot deposit money in your account without your license. And if you send somebody, say the account's only in my name and it's not in Cheryl's, which is in both our names, but if it was only in mine, I couldn't send Cheryl to deposit money into my account. You have to have personally be able to do that. I'm telling you, it's coming. It's happening quite a bit. So let me continue on. Of course, expectations that other global economic crisis will happen among the general population are probably at an all-time low right now. But the reality of the matter is that we are probably closer to a new one erupting than at any point since the last one in 2008. So it says this: since the last financial crisis, our long-term debt problems have just continued to grow. And there are many that believe that the next crisis will actually be far worse than what we experienced 10 years ago. So how bad are things at this moment? Here's 12 indicators that the next major global economic crisis could be just around the corner. Number one, the smart money, people who invest, is getting out of stocks at a rate that we haven't seen since just before the financial crash of 2008. Two, Moody's is warning that a particularly large wave of junk bond defaults is coming. By the way, junk bonds are often the early warning indicators for a major financial loss or a crisis. Three, according to the FDIC, that's the Federal Deposit Insurance Company, a closely watched category known as the assets of problem banks more than tripled during the first quarter of 2018. That means banks are in trouble. What that means is that some really big banks are now officially in problem territory. Four, U.S. Treasury bonds are having the worst start to a year since the Great Depression. Five, mortgage interest rates just hit a 7-year high, and they've been rising at the fastest pace in nearly 50 years. It's going to be absolutely crippling for the real estate and housing industries coming. Six, retail industry debt defaults have hit a record high in 2018. Seven, we're on pace for the worst year for retail store closings ever. 8, the two largest economies of the entire globe are on the verge of starting an international trade war. That's the United States and China. 9, the 9th largest economy in the world, Italy, is in the midst of yet another financial meltdown. In fact, this one appears to be worse yet. And there are fears that it could spread to other areas of the Eurozone. You remember the Eurozone had to take care of Greece. Greece has a small, very small economy, not like Italy. They will not be able to handle Italy if Italy defaults. 10, Italian banking stocks crashed really hard this week. 11, Italian 2-year bond yields are at the highest they've been since the crisis of 2014. 12, German banking giant Deutsche Bank just announced that it'll be cutting another 7,000 jobs as it seeks to turn the page on years of losses. If Deutsche Bank falls in 2018, it'll essentially be a Lehman Brothers moment for the entire planet. The mainstream media in the United States almost entirely ignores Europe. You don't hear any news about Europe at all. What is going on over there is the key, though, right now. Italy is a financial basket case, and Europe isn't going to be able to handle a complete and total Italian financial collapse. When this bubble bursts, there is nothing that anyone will be able to do to stop it, this says. Global central banks have been able to buy a few extra years of time by engaging in unprecedented levels of intervention. But now they are almost out of ammunition, and events are beginning to escalate at a very frightening pace. We shall see if they can pull another rabbit out of the hat in 2018, but I wouldn't count on it. So let me give you a little bit of a cursory note here. I am not a conspiracy theorist. I am not somebody that's saying the sky is falling, the sky is falling. But I do want to bring you abreast and up to speed on what's happening globally, because we do not get that in our news. Somebody say amen. If you want to have any global news, probably the best thing you can do is look at BBC, the British Broadcasting Centre. They will give you world news. But there's things afloat in the world that we're unaware of. And so people ask me, what do I do with all that? What do I do? How does that translate to me? I told my class last night, I'll tell you this today. Get out of debt. You have to get out of debt. The ones who will be hit the worst if a financial crisis comes are those people who are heavily in debt. People ask me all the time, it sounds parochial and rudimentary, but if you have a lot of credit cards, find the one that has the most interest rate. Get out of debt, that one first. So where you start is you start with those interest rate cards that are high, very high. And by the way, credit cards are great if you can pay them off in a month. They're terrible if you can't do that. I mean, some credit cards are actually 21% interest on the unpaid balance. That's not a credit card, that's a bank. And they're taking you to the cleaners when you have something like that. So sooner or later we're going to get it. Let me give you this one. Demographics are destiny. China finally gets it. This is a kind of an interesting scripture, or an interesting article. Let me go back to this. Demographics are destiny. So Just as American fertility rate is tanking, China is waking up to the damage in its one-child policy. If you live in China, you're fined if you have more than one child. In mid-May, the Center for Disease Control reported that the birth rate fell for nearly every group of women of reproductive age in the United States in 2017, a drop that led to the fewest newborns since 1987. Even more, it was the single biggest one-year decline, 3% since 2010, which was in the depths of the Great Recession and which lower birth rates were expected. The fertility rate is an estimate of how many babies a hypothetical group of 1,000 women would likely have over their lifetime. In 2017, America was just a paltry 1.76 births per woman. So, when talking about the economic and cultural consequences of declining birth rates, Jonathan Last, author of the book What to Expect When No One's Expecting, has written, "There's no economy that has managed to knock out gangbuster growth with a declining population." Let me repeat that. There is no economy ever on the face of the planet that's ever been able to have a gangbuster growth in their economy when their population was decreasing. Ours is decreasing. The truth has not been lost on all people. The People's Republic of China, the same day the CDC announced its findings, a story in the UK Telegraph reported that the Communist Party is considering scrapping the limits it places on how many children families can have. Decades of strict family planning control, most notably the infamous one-child policy, have been disastrous. Consequences include a dwindling workforce and a huge increase in elderly citizens. In a dramatic turnaround, China is using a formidable propaganda machine to urge prospective mothers to seize the time and conceive. That's their line. Seize the time and conceive. The irony of all this is that China's total fertility rate isn't much lower than ours, 1.57 per children, or births per woman. While China leaders are scrambling to reverse demographic trends, our intelligence is, the extent they notice the issue at all, is denial. Our common form of denial we hear is that a shortfall in childbirths will be made up for by immigration. While this has been true in the past, it's foolish to count on it being true in the future. For starters, in case you haven't noticed, Americans are aren't widely enthusiastic about high levels of immigration. Anxiety about immigration is at least one of the factors behind the 2016 election outcome. What's more, the traditional sources of those high levels of immigration, especially Mexico and Latin America, may be drying up. Since 2008, more Mexicans have left the United States than have entered it. First time ever. As for the rest of Latin America, only a handful have fertility rates above replacement level themselves. And these aren't big enough to supply the immigrants to take the place of the children American women aren't having. The problem is a cultural one. As one liberal commentator put it, instead of taking the role of parents in our society seriously, many Americans, especially the affluent, treat having children as a discretionary activity, like collecting classic cars or visiting every parrot sanctuary in the world. This attitude is the stuff of which Western demographics decline is made of. Denying the inherent connection between sex, marriage, and babies is like denying gravity, and that's what we're doing in America. We may choose to step off the roof, but we can't choose not to hit the ground. China seems to be learning this at least. Will we? Pretty interesting article. Let me give you another one. China steps up to pace in the nuclear arms race with Russia and the United States. So I told you before, we gave you some of the demographics of the nuclear arm race. We own 93, between Russia and us, Russia and America, we own 93% of the nuclear arms in the world. There's only about 6 or 7 nuclear armed countries, and some of them don't have that many at all. We know that North Korea probably has 10, the least amount. Well, now China is catching up. China is putting all of its money into its nuclear arsenal. And so China is seeing something going on, and we have not been doing that. We've actually deflated our nuclear arsenal with our accords with Russia. But China, there's no agreement they have. So this article goes on to say, experts are warning that as China continues to increase their nuclear arms race pace, the threat of conflict rises substantially. As China joins the US and Russia in pursuing more targeted nuclear weapons as a deterrent against potential threats, the looming arm race would in fact serve the opposite purpose by increasing the risk of a nuclear conflict. And don't let me forget to tell you that the Bible talks about China, the kings of the East. We know in the last days that they will come over from that area. Also, speaking about war, drone terrorism. This is another one that came out, another article. We've been talking about drones for a little while, but this one's a little bit more. It's a little bit more detailed. It came out this week. The IDF announced that an explosive-laden drone flown over the border of Gaza Strip was discovered in Israeli territory last week. So Gaza had explosives on a drone. They flew it over Israeli territory, and it came down in the Negev. Negev is a desert. It came down there, and it came down whole. They don't know why it came down, but they do know that it was either produced by Russia, China, or North Korea. They found parts on it from all three of those countries. None of them would say anything about it. And so they start to warn about the potential threat. Israel is already covering the threat. Israel scrambles electronic signals across the Gaza Strip. And so whenever the drone comes up, it goes right back down. This one came in probably down and around for where they have the electronic grid. So we don't have anything like that. You could take a drone, you could put sarin gas in it, and you can fly it over a stadium, 100,000 people in it, and you can wipe out a good number of people. There was only almost a quarter of a teaspoon of sarin gas that was let go in the Chinese subway several years ago, and it killed 58 people. And so there's a lot of things they can do. They're thinking about trying. America is thinking this, to launch other drones with a net on it so they can net the drone. Listen, we need to catch up. You know, we really need to catch up. We really need to send some people over to Israel and find out what they're doing. So basically what's happening is we're seeing the geofences is what Israel has. It's blocking radio signals, preventing drones from reaching targeted areas. So the reason why this drone came down, they believe, is because it flew so far around that fence that it lost its momentum and it went out of range, and that's why it came down in the Negev. So it's obviously working. Let me give you this one that's coming out also underneath religion. Generation Z, justice and the gospel. So it seems that many members of Generation Z, by the way, there's people that are born from the mid-1990s to the mid-2000s. They're known for a lot of things. They're technological savvy. It's their commitment to social justice. They're known for loneliness, online connectedness, and seemingly endless quest for authenticity. One thing is not as known for is commitment to gospel proclamation and traditional evangelical doctrines. So we know the millennials, a lot of the millennials, they're called the nuns. They won't go to church. But the ones that do, the Christian millennials, they're starting to have problems with the church. And the problems they're having is they want justice. They want to see people helped. They want to see the less than fortunate built up. And so the traditional churches that put money into buildings or put money into other areas are turning them off. Generation Z is looking to connect its social commitment with its Christianity. I think that's phenomenal, to be honest with you. And hopefully they will change the church. That's what that article said. Let me go a little bit further. How many are with me tonight for our... All right, let me give you this one. This is not a good one. Diversity Gone Wild. Church of England has launched a diversity drive that is specifically encouraging gay, lesbian, and transgender people to take roles of leadership and service in the local church. I'm not going to read it all to you. You've heard this over and over again. But the LGBT issue is a hot potato in the church. This article says that it's going to divide the Protestant church. It's going to be just like the Reformation. And let me tell you, it is. Forget about LGBT for a second. Just forget about that. We know Scripture has certain prohibitions. We know that God looks down on murderers. I mean, God looks down on adulterers. God looks down on deviant sexual activity. Yes? Okay. So here's the deal. Forget about LGBT, and what they're saying, the Church of England saying this, is that we want to encourage and open up our churches so that we can have vicars, which are type of pastors, and bishops who are LGBT, so we can bring more people into our churches. So forget about LGBT, because if LGBT is the same as a sin, just as, and that sexual act is a sin, which, by the way, sodomy comes from Sodom and Gomorrah. I don't know if anybody understands that or not, but it comes from that, and it's also Old Testament and New Testament. But forget about that. They're actually saying something like this. Let's replace that. We want to be inclusive of everyone, so we're going to ask adulterers, don't worry about being an adulterer. Come in, we want to make you a priest. How many of you get it? That's the exact same thing. So sin is sin. And so we're watching that happen over and over again. And I'm telling you, it's going to be a watershed issue for many, many major denominations. How many of you know that it's okay to have convictions? Amen. How many know it's okay to have convictions based on Scripture? Amen. You never hate anyone. You never discourage anybody from coming to church. You never say your sin's worse than mine, because sin is sin. But you cannot incorporate sin into theology. It's anathema. So let me give you the last one. You ready for this last one? How many know last one's always light? You ready? The sneeze. They walked in tandem, each of the 92 students filing into the already crowded auditorium. With their rich maroon gowns flowing in the traditional caps, they looked almost as grown up as they felt. Dad swallowed hard behind broad smiles. and moms freely brushed away tears. This class would not pray during the commencements, not by choice, but because of a recent court ruling that prohibited it. They could not mention God's name. The principal and several students were careful to stay within the guidelines allowed by the ruling. They gave inspirational and challenging speeches, but no one mentioned divine guidance, and no one asked for blessing on the graduates or their families. The speeches were nice, but they were routine until the final speech received a standing ovation. A solitary student walked proudly to the microphone. He stood still and silent for just a moment, and then it happened. All 92 students, every single one of them, suddenly sneezed. The student on stage simply looked at the audience and said, "God bless you." And he walked off. There is always a way. Come on, somebody say amen. I'm going to ask the ushers to come forward tonight.